I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the annihilation of an entire family. Mother, father, son, and daughter shot and stabbed and torched. The accused killer, another member of the family. Here's the story. They were brothers, business partners, and once inseparable. But prosecutors say behind the success and shared history of Keith and Paul Caneiro, resentment was quietly festering. On the morning of November 20th, 2018, two fires ignited hours apart in Monmouth County, New Jersey. One at Paul Caneiro's Ocean Township home, the other at Keith's sprawling Colts Neck mansion. Authorities allege the first blaze was a calculated diversion. At the second scene, firefighters made a horrifying discovery. Keith Caneiro shot execution style in his yard. His wife, Jennifer, and their two young children, Jesse and Sophia, murdered inside the burning home. Investigators say the killings were deliberate and fueled by money. Accusations that Paul had been stealing from their businesses, was about to be cut off financially and removed from the family trust. Prosecutors claim Paul tried to destroy evidence with fire, creating the illusion that the entire Caneiro family was under attack. Paul Caneiro has pleaded not guilty and faces life without parole if convicted. The annihilation of an entire family. Like, we covered the Murdoch trial, and he took out his wife, he took out his son, but he was still alive. His other son also still alive. Here, all four members gone. Gone. So I want to take a moment here and go through where each member of the family was found, because this was a horrific crime scene. Keith Caneiro owns a sprawling mansion, and the mansion was set on fire. So you got to put the pieces together here. Let's take a listen to a neighbor and a detective here describing where the bodies were found.
I was actually getting into the vehicle, and I have a truck, so I was getting up on the step, and as I turned, I saw a body in front of the house, in the bushes.
Did somebody provide something to cover up the body?
I believe we got a sheet from the first aid squad to cover him.
And then after that, was there something else?
Red tarp was put on top of it.
Did you do anything at that point to check Keith's body?
Yes, I rolled him over to check to see if he was deceased. He was pulseless and breathless. There was red blood, what I believe to be blood, solidified underneath him.
What, if any, other information did you learn about the inside of 15 Willowbrook Road?
That there were additional deceased victims inside the house.
Okay, and specifically, where were those additional deceased victims located?
One was in the kitchen, one was next to the staircase, and one was on the landing of the staircase.
When you say the landing of a staircase, can you be more specific?
The staircase going from the first floor to the second floor, there was a deceased victim on the floor prior to the steps, and at the halfway point, there's a landing connecting the staircases. The boy was brought out, also partially clothed. He had wounds on him as well, possibly stab wounds. And then an adult female was brought out of the residence. She was burned very, very badly, full thickness burns to see muscle structure on her body.
Okay, I want to walk through this with you, and you're looking at a blueprint of the home, and you see where four locations are. I want to start going on the screen, upper left. That is Paul Caneiro. Wait, go back to that. Can you go back to that for a second? I want to explain a couple things about it. Okay, so that's Paul Caneiro, and he's located, that area is next to the garage. So what that is telling me is that he was, remember that night, he is going out to figure out why the power is not on in his car, in the house. So he walks, it seems like he walked through the garage perhaps to go to wherever the generator was. His body found outside the house. He was shot on the grass. Let's take a look at the images now that we have here. Here's a white tarp that's on top of the victim. And then here's the red tarp as well that shows where the body was. Now we're going to pull back and we're going to take a look at the house, so you have a much better idea now. The red tarp, you see the crime scene tape is all around it. That's where he was found. And again, the part of the house that's sticking out there, that is the garage. So it seems like he may have walked through the garage to get to where the generator was, where the power was not coming out. Let's go back to that floor plan. I want you to take a look at Jennifer's body location. So this is the second body that you're going to see that is by the garage. I'm trying to describe where it is on the screen. So it would be on the left side of the screen, but on the one in the middle on the left-hand side of the screen. That's his wife, Jennifer. She was shot and she was stabbed. She's inside the home, though. These are, and let's take a look. This is the image. These are the stairs from the first floor going down to the basement. Jennifer's body is found where the photographer is standing and taking this photo. Again, stabbed in the torso, shot in the head. Let's go to the third victim now. As we go back inside the house, you go to the third victim, which is, again, below Jennifer, where we just described you. That is Jesse, his son. Jesse's body is in the kitchen. On this photo, the part that is highlighted there, but blurred, that's his leg. And you can see this is the kitchen counter. He was stabbed and killed multiple times, not shot, but stabbed. And again, he's inside the kitchen as we make our way through the home. Let's take a look at the final. Oh, this is some of the blood that was found in the kitchen, some of the blood spatter. What story does the blood tell? Did he fight? Was he running? Was he stabbed on the ground? All things that a blood expert may be able to tell us. Finally, let's get to the fourth victim, which is little Sophia. And she was found on the landing between the first and second floors. So there's like a landing between the stairs going up. Perhaps she's the last one to come down. Again, it's hard to tell. But if you started with Keith as the first victim and you come in through the garage, you can see the progression walking your way through that home. Okay, it was a brutal scene. Brings us to the first question in our investigation. What do the body locations reveal? What story does it tell? Joining me, former New Jersey prosecutor and criminal defense attorney David Gelman is with us, and New Jersey criminal defense attorney Rocco Ciparone. Great to have you both here. Thank you. David Gelman, I'll begin with you. What story is the locations of the bodies here telling you?
You know, Vinny, it's weird. I think it's telling me that he was very methodical in what he was doing. You know, he started with Paul, got him outside, potentially saying, hey, look, the generator's out, and that's why he went outside, and that's where he got stabbed and shot. Then he goes right inside, and the first person he sees is Jennifer. What's he do? Stabs her and shoots her. After that, it becomes a little weird, a little suspicious, because you have the two children. Why, in God's name, are you going to stab them? That's a question I still can't get. I can't fathom. You know, they're still your niece and nephew. If you're going to do it, you just do it quickly. But it sounds like in this situation, this was not quick. And just like you said before, the blood is going to tell a lot of things. So when they have their blood expert, he is going to say, or she is going to say, I should say, whether the children they fought, whether this was quick, painful, you know, a lot of different things. So I think the first two people, Paul and Jennifer, we know pretty well. But the last two, Jesse and Sophia, that's the mystery. And we may never know.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure that we're getting the brothers straight. So Paul is the defendant. Keith is the victim.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. It gets confusing because it's all in the family here. All right, Rocco, what story is this scene telling you about what happened to this family, how it happened, and what it ultimately means here?
So obviously there's some speculation involved in this, Vinny, right? But, you know, we know that Keith is killed outside. We know that, you know, 2 of the 3 victims inside were stabbed, and presumably with a kitchen knife. So that begs the question of whether or not his nephew was stabbed first because he was in the kitchen. What it tells me, though, is it gives the prosecutor a pretty good argument to say this was premeditation over and over and over and over again, 4 times, because, as David just said, Paul had to move methodically from person to person to person to person to kill his brother, his sister-in-law, and his niece and nephew. And usually when you see a stabbing of this nature with family members, it's a crime of passion. That's hard to fathom with nieces and nephews this young. So it's hard to speculate as to what that's about. But I would argue from the prosecution perspective that it's a premeditation over and over and over again.
And David Gelman, the children being awake, right? You know, some people are light sleepers. I could see why Jennifer might be awake if her husband's awake and he's trying to handle the power, so maybe she wakes up. They're in their own rooms. It's a mansion, literally a mansion. There must have been a lot of noise inside that house for those children to have awakened.
Well, you got to think about it. You know, you hear mom and dad probably just yelling and screaming because they're being shot at and they're being stabbed to death. I would assume that the children, even though it is a pretty big house, as you just said, I assume the children woke up. They had to have woken up. I mean, when you are hearing screeching noises of your parents being brutally murdered, you would have to think it's probably one of the last things they heard before they, you know, succumb to their injuries.
And then, Rocco, you try to go back to that moment. There's all this chaos. They're screaming, the fear for the children. And then they see Uncle Paul. And maybe in that moment they think that they're safe. But they're far from safe if, in fact, he's the one that did this.
That's the irony in this case, right? They're kids who are naturally going to gravitate, as you just said, Vinny, to Uncle Paul. This is not a situation where you have a middle of the night stranger wearing the proverbial black ski mask in the home and people are going to run away. These kids may have been looking for comfort running to Uncle Paul, which in this situation, unfortunately and horrifically, turned out to be the wrong thing, obviously.
Yeah, I could see that. You know, running to the danger because they perceive it as safety and all this. Rocco Ciparone, great to have you on the program. Thank you so much. David's going to stick around. Up next, what does the family's silence reveal?
He waited until dark, and he snuck up on the family while they slept.
Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brandon Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair. So he killed his wife and another man.
He was there, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage continues Wednesday morning on Court TV.
He stabbed his nephew Jesse multiple times in his upper body and threw his arm into his chest. And he stabbed his niece Sophia 17 times over her entire 45-pound body, including deep stab wounds in her face and the top of her head.
Like we've been saying, this was a brutal, bloody crime scene. Now, before we get back to the Caneiro case, I want to go through a few other cases just to make a point here. Let's start with Karen Reed. Remember Karen Reed was charged with murder? There she is. She was found not guilty ultimately, but was charged with murder, right? The prosecutors say, you are a killer. Well, remember her father spoke up for her all the time. Take a listen.
She didn't do this, and she feels that by speaking her mind, she will strengthen the resolve of so many others, particularly women who at some time or another in their lives have felt objectified, victimized, dehumanized.
Like, it's just not that unusual, right? Like, your father, my daughter is accused of murder. No, she didn't do it. Let me take you to another case. It's a case that's happening now. Sarah Grace Patrick from Georgia, accused of murdering her mother and stepfather. Her grandfather has spoken up on her behalf.
I'm sort of on a campaign on Sarah's case. I think she's innocent until she's proven guilty. I think that I need to tell people what kind of person she really was. I mean, I'm her grandfather. She and I were very close. And she was a wonderful little girl.
Not unusual, right? Like if your child, your grandchild, your wife, your husband, your son, your daughter is charged with murder, are you going to say something? Are you going to say something? Ashley Benefield, remember her? She was the ballet dancer charged with murder. Her mother and her daughter outside of the courthouse, letting their voices and their message be heard that mommy, set my mommy free. My daughter is innocent. My mom is innocent. Like the loved ones of the defendant oftentimes will speak up and speak very loudly when their loved one is accused of murder. So let's now bring it back to the Caneiro case. Let's take a look first what's happening in the gallery, right? This is the gallery in that New Jersey courtroom, and there are folks there sitting in that front row. They may very well be supporting Paul Caneiro, but guess what? I don't know, because nobody's talking, folks. Nobody's talking. If you go back in time, Paul Caneiro's original lawyer, who's no longer his lawyer, Bob Honecker, who's been a regular on Court TV for years, told ABC News on Saturday, this is 4 days after the murders, that Paul Caneiro's wife, Susan, and daughters, Marissa and Caitlin, fully support him and would be willing to testify at his hearing on Wednesday. All three escaped the fire unharmed, right? 4 days after the murders, they said that. Then we heard nothing until a Facebook post in 2021. And Caitlin Caneiro, one of Paul Caneiro's daughters, posted on Facebook in 2021, this is a picture. It's her with all four victims. She talked about how much she missed each of her slain family members. She ended with, every day is a struggle without the four of you. It will never get easier. I hope I make you all proud, and I miss you most until we meet again. Love you always. And that's from Caitlin, who's now 33 years old. Okay, so she's saying something, but wait, she's not talking about Dad. Now, most recently, New York Post was reaching out to the family members, and the family members, they say, have chosen not to comment publicly. The New York Post reported this in an article from September of 25 about Caitlin Caneiro's Facebook post. Caitlin, a graduate of Seton Hall University who now works as a nurse, did not return messages seeking comment. Her mother, Susan Caneiro, who has since relocated to Toms River, New Jersey, said, no comment. I will not comment on anything when the Post visited her. So they're saying nothing. Like, Dad, my husband, is on trial for murder of another family member. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. What does the family's silence reveal here? Like, they're saying nothing. Joining me, two New Jersey criminal defense attorneys are with me. Still with us, David Gelman, and joining us, Mario Gallucci. All right, Mario, I'll begin with you. What does this silence reveal here?
Look, as you said, Vinny, this case was overwhelmingly brutal, and this family is forever affected by this. It's the spouse and his children whose lives were completely changed as a result of what probably was this man's actions. Look, he's not guilty yet, but his actions forever have affected their lives. In the scenarios that you just showed us, we have a father, we have a grandfather, we have a mother, but this is a spouse and children who are forever affected by these actions. And the brutality of this, the stabbing of his niece and his nephew, stabbing, not shooting, stabbing in a brutal way. I saw the blood splatter. I saw the knife wounds. It's something that is very difficult for them to probably get over. And I don't think it's something that they miss their family. They miss their cousins, their aunt, their uncle. And it's not something that, they want to stand on top of a skyscraper and say, hey, my daddy is innocent. And I've tried many cases. I tried the treadmill murder case here in New Jersey where his parents stood up on top of buildings screaming his innocence. So, I think it's just a tragedy, this case, that's really affected them.
So, David Gelman, what does it reveal to you, the silence of the family?
It sounds to me like they're really hurt. Think about it. Look, they can't say anything. They can't go and say, look, oh, my son is innocent, because he's the one who was accused of killing not only their other son, but their grandchildren and their daughter-in-law. I mean, think about this, Vinny. I know you just gave examples of the other three people who are accused of murder, but that is a different scenario altogether. You got to think about the chief factor, if you will, where you have these 4 individuals who are all related and very close, and now they're not there together. And the other thing I'd like to remind you, they may have representation, and their representation may say, shut up, don't say a word. I think that's very possible, because if I was representing them, I would say, don't say anything to the press, don't say anything to anybody. They probably just want to be forgotten. They don't want to hear about it, because all it's going to do is bring up memories that are going to be very, very hurtful to them.
Yeah, Mario, it has to be so difficult. We see defendants on trial, and we often don't think about the family of the accused and what this does to them and how it upends their lives. And I think you spoke very eloquently about that. Do you suspect that there's any ongoing relationship? Does it tell you that maybe the relationship is done, that dad's kind of on his own literally? Or is this some level of strategy?
I doubt it's a strategy. I think that this relationship is probably forever destroyed, but it's still father, still husband, and you're always going to have love. I mean, love is love. But, how far do you push that bond? How far does love go that you're going to support, what your father did here? Your father wiped out all of your relatives if he's proven guilty. And it's a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. I mean, I've tried dozens of murder cases in both New York and New Jersey, and, family is either very supportive for the most part, or, they run away from it. And they don't want to be part of it. They don't want to be known to be the family of a person who brutally murdered somebody. It's a very difficult position they're in.
Oh, it is. They're victimized as well. Mario Gallucci is going to stick around. David Gelman, thank you so much. Great to see you. As always, still to come. Speaking of family, does Corey Caneiro need to testify? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murders of Keith Caneiro, his wife, and his children, murdered with a gun and a knife. A brutal, bloody ending for this New Jersey family. And prosecutors say it was Keith Caneiro's own brother who did it. Here's the story. The Caneiro case is not just a murder trial. It is a portrait of a family imploding under financial pressure and alleged betrayal. Prosecutors say Paul Caneiro, once dependent on his younger brother Keith, watched his world unravel as Keith moved to cut him out of their businesses, salary, and trust. According to court filings, Keith believed Paul had been siphoning tens of thousands of dollars, including money earmarked for his children's futures. Days later, Keith, his wife Jennifer, and their children were all dead. Authorities allege Paul carefully staged 2 fires, one at his own home before dawn, another at Keith's house, to mask the crime and mislead prosecutors. Surveillance evidence, forensic findings, and ballistic evidence form the backbone of the state's case. The defense insists Paul Caneiro is innocent and has waited years for his chance to clear his name. Now, after more than 7 years, a jury will decide whether jealousy and money led to one of New Jersey's most brutal family massacres. Unbelievable. So, Keith and Paul are brothers, but there's a third Caneiro brother, and his name has come up during the course of this trial. In fact, it came up during the defense open. Take a listen.
He did not commit these crimes. He did not hurt anyone. He did not harm anyone. He did not set any house on fire, and he certainly did not brutally murder the family members that you will hear he loved and cherished and adored so much. Corey Caneiro was on the outside of that. He wasn't a part of that. He wasn't a part of the businesses, and he wasn't a part of that close relationship. He was on the outside. But they never investigated Corey. They never looked into Corey. They never did a single thing to investigate Corey. Not a single thing. They searched Paul's house, and they searched Keith's house. They never searched Corey's house. They searched Paul's phone and his electronic devices, and Keith's. They never searched Corey's. They got surveillance video from the area of Paul's house, the same way they did for Keith. They never did that for Corey. And they took and they tested Paul's DNA the same way they did Keith, Jennifer, Sophia, and Jesse's. But they never even bothered to get Corey Caneiro's DNA. I ask that you pay close attention to the incredible lack of investigation that was done in this case, especially as it relates to Corey Caneiro. And they want you to follow the evidence. They want you to follow the money. Well, so do we. Because when it comes to the $3 million that was at stake, what you'll learn is it doesn't lead you to Paul. It leads you directly to Corey.
She's like literally pointing the finger at Corey Caneiro, the third brother, in that opening statement. Okay, so what have we learned about Corey Caneiro during the course of the trial? Well, there's some testimony from the lead detective, Richard Zarillo, who talked about a conversation that he had with Corey. So it's not like they completely ignored him, but there was an interesting fact that came up during this testimony about Corey Caneiro. Take a listen.
You spoke with Corey Caneiro on more than one occasion as far as this investigation, right? Yes. One time you spoke with Corey Caneiro, you were in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
It would have been obviously more convenient for your investigation if Corey Caneiro had come to you, right?
Yes.
But that you determined was not going to be possible, right?
Correct.
And if you wanted to talk to him that night, you would need to drive to Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And that was because Corey had a medical condition that prevented him from driving at night?
That was what was told to Detective Petrozello, I guess.
Told to Detective Petrozello by Corey?
Yes.
So Corey Caneiro can't drive at night, or says he can't drive at night. We know the killer was driving in the dark. We do know that. Now, one more interesting moment involving Corey Caneiro during the course of testimony so far in this case. On the stand is a longtime employee of the Caneiro brothers. So he knows Keith very well for years and knows Paul very well for years. Take a listen to this testimony.
Keith's house pretty often around that time, right?
Yeah.
And that's because both Keith would tell you that, and also you would see Paul there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Keith had another brother named Corey, right?
Yes.
Were you aware that there was a time period when Corey was living in the basement of Keith's house?
I was not, no.
And did you ever see Corey at Keith's house?
I don't remember. I don't remember like seeing him there when I was there. Maybe one time, like it's a while ago.
That's kind of a peculiar little fact, right? Peculiar. Corey Caneiro was sleeping in his brother's basement for a while? Like, what's the story behind that? Can't drive at night, sleeping in his brother's basement? defense saying he also had a motive, a monetary motive. All of this brings us to the next question in our investigation. Does Corey Caneiro need to testify? His name keeps popping up during the course of the case. Joining me, attorney and psychologist Dr. Gene Cirillo is with us, and still with us, New Jersey criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. Mario, what are your thoughts here? Does Corey Caneiro need to get on that witness stand?
So I think it's very interesting that Monica, in her opening statement, basically did what we call confirmation bias, meaning that the detectives had a suspect immediately, took all of the evidence, concentrated every bit of that evidence towards that suspect, and didn't pay really much attention to any other suspect that could possibly be there. So as a criminal defense attorney, sometimes you know, in a case like this, I don't even think there was a plea bargain. So you have a client that has nothing to lose by going to trial. And as a defense attorney, sometimes you go into a trial with a pen and a pad. And in this case, Monica, in an opening statement, and you should do an opening statement, knows that she has to say something. The jury wants you to say something. And I think her theory of confirmation bias is the best theory she had at this point. And there are facts that do substantiate that maybe they should have paid more attention to Corey. Why was he living in the basement? Will they call him as a witness? I doubt it. I think that they need to try to get out everything they can when the prosecution's on their case without calling Corey.
All right. Dr. Gene Cirillo, what are your thoughts here? Does Corey Caneiro need to testify? If I'm in the jury box, I'm like, somebody's got to call this guy. You keep talking about him. I want to hear from the third brother.
Third brother, probably including the jury, and the defense has the best chance of showing reasonable doubt that the police failed to investigate another potential criminal. They didn't do deep DNA or any other thorough investigation, at least as far as we know, on Corey. It was all focused on the one that they felt, as Mario said, confirmation bias. They already had decided that Paul was the guilty one. And it shows tunnel vision, and the defense doesn't have to prove innocence. They just have to inject reasonable doubt that another party could have done it. He had access to the same financial records, especially if he was living in the basement. He had needs too, so we can't rule him out, and we can't rule him out as a second party or an accessory.
Mario, let me ask you, I'm from New Jersey originally. That's where I practiced. The jurors in New Jersey, they're skeptical. Who are they going to hold responsible if he doesn't take the stand? Like, who would get the brunt of it, prosecution or the defense?
So if I was Monica Mastalone, in my summation, I would stand up and say, if they don't call him, where is Corey? If Corey is not a problem, why did they not call him? We know this about Corey, it came out in evidence. We know that about Corey came out in evidence. If none of that is true, why did we not hear from him? So I think Monica is looking forward to them not calling him because she could use it in her summation. It's very easy summation to do with confirmation bias.
So the defense will not put him up there. All right, Dr. Gene Cirillo, to me it's always about the jury, right? And I've seen this in many cases we've covered through the years, that there are obvious witnesses that keep coming up that never make it to the witness stand. And I feel like it's like our system is almost letting us down. Like we bring these people in and want them to tell us the truth, but we don't give them all the facts. Why does our system work that way?
The defense seems to be using Corey more as a shadow figure, as somebody who could have done it. But, you know, they could also call him as a witness, but it would be risky because the prosecutor would probably aggressively cross-examine him. And if he said some good things about himself, if he had a good alibi, and he showed his innocence, then he would be off the hook completely. Whereas if they don't call him, there's always the possibility that he might have been in there. Don't forget, there were 2 men at one point seen on the video cameras, and they don't know who the second one was. They haven't yet identified him.
You know, the one thing, Mario, I'm a former prosecutor, that I would do with Caneiro, because this whole thing about him not driving at night. Like, on the one hand, if he actually doesn't drive at night, I want the jury to make sure that they know that he didn't make that up to create some sort of alibi for himself, that it couldn't have been me because I don't even drive at night. So to me, that is just hanging out there, and I think it needs to be resolved for prosecutors.
Oh, I agree completely with you, but the defense isn't going to call him. They don't have to call him. But if I was the prosecutor, I would absolutely call him, unless there's a way that they could get that evidence out before the jury without calling him.
All right. Big thanks, Mario Gallucci. I mean, amazing job you did in the courtroom. Everyone was talking about it here in the newsroom, and great to have you on the show tonight. Dr. Gene Cirillo is sticking around. Coming up next, did Paul Caneiro's accident impact his behavior?
Give me the login, Paul. Give me the login, Paul.
Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brandon Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair, so he killed his wife and another man.
He was there, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage continues Wednesday morning on Court TV.
It's your house? Yes. Where is all the DVD stuff for the cameras and everything in the house?
It's in the garage.
In the garage?
Yeah.
Do you have them running right now?
I've been having problems with stuff in the garage.
You've been having problems with stuff in the garage?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we haven't seen much of Paul Caneiro speak, but just in that moment, I don't know, seems a little off to me. Now, obviously, the allegation is he's committed quadruple murder, double arson, and all that. So, yeah, I get it. But there's something like a little deeper that just seems a little off about Paul Caneiro. I want you to take a look at this from the Asbury Park Press in New Jersey, talking about Paul Caneiro. He was nearly killed in a 2012 car crash in Asbury Park that left him with a long and painful recovery. Friends and neighbors said Paul Caneiro suffered injuries to his head, body, limbs, and nervous system in that November 2012 crash. According to a lawsuit his attorney filed related to that crash, family friend Demetrius Potamianos said Caneiro required surgery after surgery after surgery on his neck, back, and shoulders in the years following the accident. He said the recovery took a physical and emotional toll on Caneiro, and he was, quote, never the same. Devastating accident. Brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour. Did Paul Caneiro's accident impact his behavior? Still with me, attorney and psychologist Dr. Gene Cirillo, and joining me, New Jersey criminal defense attorney Robert Perry is with us. All right, Dr. Gene, let me start with you. Like, this was a devastating accident. They said there were head injuries, tons of surgeries. He was on disability. His older brother is making all the money. He's not keeping up his end. Do you think that this accident impacted Paul Caneiro's behavior?
Well, it certainly changed his life trajectory, that he went from being an active, useful member of the business to being essentially a dependent sibling. His wife, Paul's wife, Keith's wife, a lot of people worked in that business, and Paul was relegated now to the background. Plus, his brother was threatening to cut him off. It doesn't seem like there's long-term criminal intent, but the financial desperation, he might lose his house, he might lose his title. It's almost like he had nothing left to lose, so he could have done this. However, there's one way the injury can be used by the defense to throw shade on the fact that someone with his level of disability, being on heavy medication, having a limp, having difficulty getting around, severe back pain to the extent he couldn't work at anything, and as far as I know, he was still getting disability. Could he have carried out this quadruple murder in the time it took, using a gun, using a knife, very up close, distance, very quickly? That they could say that he didn't have the physical ability to do such a crime at the time, which even if he had the intent, he wouldn't have carried out himself. That's an argument that the defense could use. Of course, it could bring in rebuttal experts saying that they saw him playing golf sometime and that he could do it if he was really motivated.
Or traveling the world with his alleged mistress. It didn't slow him down there either. Robert Perry, what are your thoughts here about the impact that this had on him, and could it at all impact this trial?
Yeah, so first of all, I completely agree. The real impact for the defense is the argument that he was just physically incapable of committing this crime, that even though he's on disability and he was in this accident that almost killed him, somehow he turns into this super ninja who is able to overpower his younger brother, who's stronger than him, and navigate throughout the house and carry these heavy cans of gasoline. And I think that's a pretty compelling argument that the defense is going to exploit. Now, could it impact the case in other ways? And the real important question is does this present an affirmative defense with mental health issues? Could he claim insanity or incompetency or diminished capacity? And unlikely, I would say. But number one, he's represented by excellent counsel who would have explored that and had him examined and advanced that defense if it were available. Otherwise, there would have been other evidence, other people indicating that he was somehow unable to comprehend what was going on around him. So I would say with respect to the mental health evidence, unlikely it's going to materially help the defense, but the physical evidence is certainly compelling.
Follow up to that, Robert, how could they get that evidence in front of this jury? Does he have to testify to get in the evidence about what he has been through and some of the particulars of that accident?
If I was his attorney, I would try and avoid it, certainly. I wouldn't want my client testifying. I think there's other ways you could do it. You could certainly introduce medical records from his treating medical physician that could make that point. If there are other witnesses who had an opportunity to observe him suffering from his medical infirmities, you could get it in that point. So to the extent I could avoid him testifying and getting into that way, I would certainly try that first.
Yeah, there were 4 people who could have, well, 2 adults that could have testified perhaps about it. They're dead. And we were talking about this earlier this hour. His wife and his daughters, where are they? They've been silent throughout. So we'll see if they jump into the fray to get this evidence in front. But it does seem relevant to the story, and we'll see if the jury finds out. Dr. Gene Cirillo, great to see you again. Thank you so much. Robert Perry, New Jersey criminal defense attorney, thanks so much. You know, it is so difficult to understand how someone could allegedly go from brother and best man to cold-blooded murder. Did something happen to Paul Caneiro's brain? Was he mentally ill when he allegedly killed his brother's family? Or was this really just about the money? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for the answers as the investigation continues.